Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. You know, one of the last vestiges of the tsunami of lawfare that was waged against candidate Donald Trump as he successfully staged the greatest single comeback in American political history, was the enormous amount of disinformation and the questionable tactics used in the 2020 election. We know that the president has charged Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, with examining the security and the reliability and the manipulability of electronic voting machines. We know that some of the machines used in the 2020 election and beyond were produced by a Venezuelan company. That causes reason for pause. There are very serious allegations of evidence of Chinese online manipulation in electronic voting machines that we were told were not connected to the internet, but were. But there's also the fake news Biden Justice Department created crime of being an alternative elector. You see, America has a rich history when we have close and contested elections, and when election results are expected to be determined in court, of filing an alternative electoral college slate in order to preserve the rights of your candidate in the event that they prevail in court. The Biden Justice Department took the position that if Trump supporters who were preparing to contest the elections in Arizona, in Nevada, and in Georgia founded slates of alternative electors, that was somehow illegal or improper. If you read the minutes of the meeting of the Georgia electors, most of whom were state party officials and other Trump loyalists, they specifically say we're forming this slate of electors contingent, of course, on our prevailing in upcoming litigation. We're doing this to preserve our rights and the rights of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. But there's a rich history of this in the United States. In 1877, which was a very, very convoluted and long electoral college battle for the presidency, there were alternative electors filed on behalf of Thomas Jefferson. In 1960, late at night, Richard Nixon was declared the winner in Hawaii. His electors were therefore chosen, but John F. Kennedy's campaign, run quite ably, I might add, by his brother Bobby Kennedy, later to be Attorney General of the United States, and of course, father of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose birthday we celebrated only a few days ago, really believed that once all the absentee ballots were counted in Hawaii, that JFK would be the winner. Fortunately, they formed an alternative elector slate for the Electoral College, and roughly 24 hours later, the results were overturned and Kennedy was declared the winner, and his electors were sent to the Electoral College. So they have attempted specifically to try to destroy Mayor Giuliani. The case in Georgia, of course, collapsed under the weight of the epic corruption of Fonnie Wills, the prosecutor there, who coordinated closely with the Biden Justice Department, proving that this was indeed a conspiracy, part of the ongoing conspiracy to deny Donald Trump the White House that began with an Oval Office meeting in 2016, continued through the Russian collusion hoax, 3 years of it, 2 fake impeachments, completely fraudulent. The second one actually regarding Ukraine, designed to cover up the fact that Joe Biden was the one who withheld $1 billion in return for a demand that they fire the prosecutor looking into his son Hunter and the Chinese energy company that was involved. So that was both active and pre-active, I should say, defensive and offensive, claiming that Trump asked the Ukrainian officials what the story was on the Biden's financial involvement in the country. They tried to make that the crime. Then, of course, we had the very questionable elections of 2020. I'm sorry, but when 3 states all stopped counting in the middle of the night, at 3 a.m. to be precise, when Republican observers, who by state law are allowed to be there and observe, are physically removed by the police, as happened in Detroit, when suddenly out of nowhere, roughly 300,000 paper ballots appear, and although they supposedly were mailed in, many of them are not folded. Yes, I have deep suspicions about paper ballots. It's interesting that Bill Barr, of all people, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, said that paper ballots were an open invitation for voter fraud. Yet when Bill Barr was presented with actual evidence of paper ballot-based voter fraud in the state of Pennsylvania by the U.S. Attorney in Philadelphia, who had conducted an extensive investigation, Bill Barr's order were to bury that case, and they did. I bring this all up because Rudy Giuliani's case was theoretically supposed to go to trial today. It has been delayed yet again. That these charges continue to pend in Arizona against Rudy Giuliani and former Republican State Party Chairman Michael McDonald, a bulldog of a man, one of President Trump's longest and oldest supporters, former Clark County Chairman Jesse, who is a great friend of mine. These people are going to go to trial for performing an alternative elector slate. And this, of course, they could be pardoned by the governor, whose name is Lombardo. Now, Lombardo is a former sheriff of Clark County, which could be the most corrupt place on earth. In Nevada, they actually mail a ballot to anyone who's on the voter rolls, whether you've requested a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot or not. When I spoke to a Trump rally in Las Vegas, outside of Las Vegas, shortly before the 2024 election, I was the main speaker. Man came up to me with 5 ballots, all of them to the same address, one of them addressed to him, but the other 4 addressed to some other person at that same address. I said, "What is this?" He said, "Well, these are the 4 ballots mailed to the apartment that I rent." I said, "Well, who are these other people?" He said, "These are all people who rented the apartment before me." I said, "Well, where are they now?" They said, "Well, 2 of them," he said, I checked into it, 2 of them are dead. 1 of them has moved out of state. I said, "Well, you theoretically could vote 4 times and nobody would know." And he said, "Yeah, but that would be illegal." I said, so you're just going to mail in your ballot?" He said, "No, I'm going to show up and vote in person because I don't trust the system." So Nevada elections under the machine of Harry Reid was and is an efficiency of voter fraud. Trump really turned the tables on the all-powerful culinary unit. That is the union of those who work in hotels and casinos, and it had always been the backbone of the Harry Reid get out the vote Democrat machine. My sister was a cocktail waitress in Las Vegas. She was tall, had very long legs, and was quite attractive. It's hard work, a lot of time on your feet, but because she had seniority, she would they would move you to superior places. So they'd put you in a pit where high rollers played blackjack, and you would get larger tips, or you had to work, the floor. But a longtime cocktail waitress told me that Trump's proposal to do away with the tax on tips turned that union upside down, that when the shop stewards would instruct the waitresses and waiters that they were to vote for Kamala Harris, there was an uproar, and that Trump pulled a huge number of Clark County union votes from Kamala Harris. Now, it's interesting, if you go back and look, Kamala Harris came out with her own proposal to end the tax on tips weeks after Donald Trump, acting like it was her idea. But the people of Nevada knew otherwise. But this trial in Arizona is still pending. Rudy Giuliani charged with Michael McDonald and Jesse Law and other patriots. And Sheriff Lombardo is a Republican, and I think by all rights he should at least push for their pardons. But they have a pardon board that includes Aaron Ford, the very left-wing, extraordinarily ambitious Democrat Attorney General who brought this case to begin with. This is a case that shouldn't have been brought because forming an alternative elector slate is not a crime. Mike McDonald and Jesse Law and the other electors in Arizona will ultimately prevail in court, but not after hundreds of millions of dollars being paid to lawyers. So again, not all the damage done in the theft of the 2022 elections have been addressed. Kelly Ward, former Arizona Party chairman, a good woman. Tyler Bauer, Republican National Committee man, very close, of course, to TPUSA. These patriots stand, in danger of going to jail and ending their livelihood in a case that is completely and totally political. This is happening in Arizona as well, as I said, in Nevada. So it's more of the same lawfare, and it needs to end. It is time to turn the tables. I think we need accountability and justice regarding those who planned the whole Russian collusion hoax and those who stole this election. I want to know about those machines. And I think we'll get back to that, because I think there are elements of our own government who are opposed to Tulsi Gabbard and others getting to the bottom of the reliability and the security and the safety of these electronic voting machines. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
President Donald Trump went right into the belly of the beast in Davos, sitting down to a highly elite globalist collection of billionaires and financial interests at the World Economic Forum, run by that guy Klaus Schwab, who does perhaps the worst Henry Kissinger impression I've ever seen, and his equally offensive sidekick, Noah Harari, Yuval Noah Harari, who the people who talk about putting chips under our skin in order to control us. And he had a very blunt message. He was blunt and completely unapologetic over the fact that he stands for a strong and unified West, and he rejects their plans for the new world order. He is urging Europe to abandon self-destructive political culture that's embraced it over the last decade. The open doors, of course, to immigration is destroying most of Europe. President Trump warned that Europe's current trajectory to produce predictable results of weaker economics, lower living standards, collapsing birth rates, mass migration that strains any social cohesion, and militaries no longer capable of defending their own territory. The policies the president says haven't made Europe more compassionate or enlightened. They've made it vulnerable and dependent on the United States. wasn't until Donald Trump's first term that he figured out that our NATO partners were very, very, very far behind in their NATO dues, and that we, the United States, had been paid up and paying for them as well for years. Trump got $650 million back for what we were owed at NATO. Trump, of course, reminded his audience of his own European roots and reaffirmed the deep historical bonds between the United States and Europe, while making it clear that friendship requires honesty. President Trump argued that energy independence, secure borders, fair trade, and real economic growth, not some woke ideological crusade, are the foundations of Western strength. Trump very bluntly warned our allies who weaken themselves ultimately become liabilities rather than partners. The reality is, Trump argued, is particularly evident in Greenland. He's very serious about Greenland. He declared to the NATO allies that they have an obligation to defend their own territory, and the uncomfortable truth is that no nation or combination of nations can credibly secure Greenland except for the United States. We have a security interest in Greenland because of the increase in activity in the Arctic by both the Chinese and the Russians. That makes the U.S. interest in Greenland a matter of national security, not just imperial ambition, although there is no question that with U.S. dollars, the people in Greenland would have a much higher standard of life. Denmark cannot subsidize the people of Greenland to take advantage of the minerals, rare earth minerals, oil and gas that are there. And the idea that any colonial power still has a colony, I should say any European power, still has a colony in our hemisphere. After all of the Caribbean colonies or territories of Britain and France all became independent, well, it's a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. So the president put it right there in their face. He was explicit that he does not seek to acquire Greenland by force. I don't think that will be necessary. This is very simple. The people of Greenland should take a vote on determination. Let the people decide whether they want to be independent. I'm not even talking about becoming a state. Not quite yet. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. I have to say, in my 50 years in American politics, I've never seen anything as shocking as this video of Black Lives Matter storming and disrupting religious services in a church in Minneapolis. This is beyond anything that I've seen. To me, this is an inflection point. If you view this in the context that the day before, a Black Lives Matter spokeswoman called on Minneapolis to burn, her words, to burn. And with the incredible uptick in violence and incidents in Minnesota, events are spinning out of control, and the Minnesota state and local law enforcement officials refuse to restore order, and attacks on ICE agents and increasing calls for violence against them continues. To me, this screams out for the president to do what he did not do at the end of his first term and invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. After all, it has been invoked previously by John F. Kennedy, by Lyndon Johnson, by President George H.W. Bush, to deal with emergencies in our country when local law enforcement cannot and is not willing to keep control. And meanwhile, federal law enforcement, you can see, are already back to doing their job. The new numbers that are in shows that Donald Trump is keeping his promise to be a law and order president. According to the newly released statistics, arrests by the FBI surged almost 200% in 2025. President Donald Trump's first year back in office. FBI Director Kash Patel says the difference is President Trump's decisive leadership and his unwavering support of the men and women in blue. From September 2025 to September 2026, the FBI made roughly 67,000 arrests. That's up just 22,500 during Biden's final year. That's a staggering 197% increase. Now, Patel called the results historic, crediting Trump's tough-on-crime policies and administration that lets cops be cops. The surge isn't about raw numbers. The FBI reports a 20% drop in the national murder rate. The capture of the 5 FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives in a single year, that's never happened before. And the disruption of more than 18,000 gangs and criminal enterprises more than doubled during Biden's years in business. There is unfinished business there. I know that the FBI has evidence of a Indian casino in Oklahoma where there has been almost a 20-year illegal skim by non-Indians. We're talking about losses as high as $10 billion that was skimmed off the top illegally. At least one U.S. senator is aware of this. At least one U.S. congressman is aware of it. The Biden Justice Department had an active FBI investigation into this skim operation in Oklahoma, one of the larger Indian casinos. But they abruptly ended their investigation after the tribe in question gave an extraordinarily large contribution to Joe Biden's reelection. This was prior to his dropping out. I'm very hopeful that the FBI will get to the bottom of this. By the way, that $10 billion, I believe, was flown out to a bank in Costa Rica and may even today be in a bank in Texas, which means it could be recovered for the American taxpayers or redistributed to Native Americans. I think in this case, the Native Americans were exploited by non-Indians, and it is a massive scandal, one that I hope the FBI will look into under Kash Patel. It is extraordinary that agents under Patel have seized almost 2,000 kilos of fentanyl, which is enough to kill 130 million Americans, by the way, which is a 31% increase in drug interdiction under Kash Patel. Agents tied to nihilistic violent extremism jumped almost 500%. Espionage arrests 35%. More than 6,000 missing or exploited children have been recovered, up 22%. Operations like their Operation Summer Heat, which led to more than 9,000 arrests, shows what happens when federal law enforcement does its job instead of apologizing to criminals and trying to find non-existent Russian collusion. It's amazing to me that Trey Gowdy, who now suddenly pops up out of nowhere, the former South Carolina congressman, rumors saying that he aspires to replace Pam Bondi, but at the time, Trey Gowdy defended the FBI's efforts to take down Donald Trump and to investigate Donald Trump over things that did not happen. It's good that after years of chaos and all of that defund the police stuff, remember all that? The political paralysis, we're finally seeing a cleaning up of the streets. On the other hand, what I think most Americans want to see is the ringleaders in the greatest single hoax and abuse of power in American history, the Russian collusion hoax, held accountable and charged for seditious conspiracy. You can make a very, very strong case that the meeting that began in the White House with Barack Obama in the chair, that included Vice President Joe Biden, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, the true ringleader of this conspiracy, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, and General James Clapper, the head of the Director of National Intelligence, actually at the time, and the Clinton plan was discussed in that meeting. The idea of creating a false narrative about Donald Trump and the Russians was discussed in that meeting. And Brennan very carefully slipped in the so-called Steele dossier into the formal IC intelligence community report to the president that day to get it on the record. He tried to hide it in the footnotes, but it's there. Brennan knew that the Steele dossier was a fraud. He knew that it had been paid for by Hillary Clinton. This was the famous dossier that falsely claimed that Donald Trump, while visiting Moscow as a private businessman, had stayed at the fabulous George V Hotel and had a suite in which he was entertained by prostitutes urinating on a bed that had previously been slept in by President Barack Obama. This is a total and complete fabrication. Anyone who knows Donald Trump knows that he's a germaphobe, and his idea of a good time is probably not watching other people urinate, just as we know he likes women and not girls like Jeffrey Epstein. And some might suggest, based on the evidence, Bill Clinton. Those who visited Epstein's Island is an interesting rogues gallery. Former Governor Bill Richardson was there. Former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell, another big Democrat, was there. Bill Clinton had put out statements saying he'd never visited the island till about a month ago, when these new photographs and emails make it very clear that the FAA records I published in my book, The Clintons' War on Women, way back in 2015, that showed that Bill was on the island, coupled with the sworn testimony of a number of the brave victims of Epstein who refused to take millions of dollars in settlements and fought on with their court settlements. I've read all of that when I wrote my book, The Clintons' War on Women. And it's very clear that Bill Clinton was on the island multiple times. So it's interesting how this entire issue has really blown up in the face of the Democrats. It was a very important showdown in the U.S. Supreme Court. Liberals attempted to use the precedent of racist anti-gun ownership laws to justify gun control. Justices on the High Court sharply questioned an attorney trying to defend Hawaii's sweeping restrictions on lawful gun owners, particularly the state's reliance on an 1865 Louisiana law rooted in the infamous Black Codes. Now, those post-Civil War statutes were designed to strip newly freed Black Americans of their rights, including, yes, the right to keep and bear arms. Under the court's landmark 2022 Bruin decision, gun laws must align with America's historical tradition. But Neil Gorsuch, the most libertarian member of the Supreme Court, made it clear that racist outliers don't qualify. He challenged the Hawaii's lawyer on why the shameful Black Code argument should carry any weight, noting that Bruin specifically rejects isolated and unconstitutional laws. This was a huge breakthrough for gun owners. Justice Sam Alito, the only other one of the handful on the Supreme Court who are solid, went further, calling on what he described as the height of irony. The very purpose of the so-called Black Codes, the justice explained, was to disarm Black citizens so they could be terrorized by the Democrat Ku Klux Klan as well as abusive local authorities. Citing those laws to justify today's modern attempts to restrict gun ownership suggests turns the whole Second Amendment on its head as an argument. Even Justice Brett Kavanaugh echoed those concerns. He compared the argument to past attempts to defend non-unanimous juries, which was another racist tactic relic the court unanimously eventually rejected. Constitutional rights, the court said, are not defined by discriminatory laws meant to suppress them. So, pointing to this rebuke, the Hawaii state attorney insisted the statute was race neutral, which clearly it wasn't, and claimed it had been approved implicitly, at least by Congress. The justices weren't buying it. The exchange underscores a broader truth, which is, of course, that gun control advocates are increasingly forced to rely on discredited, racially motivated laws to justify restrictions on our right to keep and bear arms the Constitution just does not allow. The Supreme Court seems ready to remind them that that fundamental right is not negotiable. It looks to me like the gun laws of Hawaii are about to go down for the count. Actress Pam Grier, remember her? She did her best Jussie Smollett impression during a recent appearance on ABC's The View. This was unbelievable. During a Monday appearance that I looked at, Grier told her co-host Sonny Hostin that her mother shielded her as a child from lynched bodies hanging from trees in Columbus, Ohio, suggesting that she personally witnesses scenes of racial terror while growing up in the 1950s. Here's the problem. Historical records show that Grier was born in 1949. According to the Equal Justice Initiative and America's Black Holocaust Museum, the last documented lynching in the state of Ohio occurred in 1911. That's 4 decades before Pam Grier was born. So there's only 15 recorded lynchings in Ohio's entire history. Ohio was not a state that allowed slavery, and none took place in Franklin County, where Columbus, the city Pam Grier is from, is located. Even more damaging to this claim, public records show that Grier actually didn't grow up in Ohio at all, so she didn't even live there. Despite these facts, The View offered no pushback, no clarification, no correction, allowing emotionally charged but obviously completely false nonsense to go unchallenged on national television. This is really what you expect. You see, real journalism is dead. Most television is entertainment, and a lot of it is controlled by leftists who twist the rules, the facts, and the truth. You'll always get the stone cold truth right here in the Stone Zone. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Minnesota again, where events seem to be spinning out of control, and where I've said publicly, I think it's time for the president to use his constitutional authority to enact the Insurrection Act of 1807. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, radical left-wing ideologies once again on full display when it comes to New York's new socialist mayor, Zoran the Ayatollah Mamdani. He's now openly calling for abolishing ICE during a friendly appearance on The View, of course. Now, he has already passed a law which says that a private property owner, say someone who owned a small apartment house or a 3-story walk-up or whatever it may be, a landlord, somebody who was renting a property or living in a property, must first offer that property for sale to the city of New York before they can put it on the open market. And then if the city passes on it and they put it on the open market and they get an offer, they now must go back to the government and ask the government if they want to match or better the offer, the so-called COPA plan. This is unconstitutional. Frank Morano, the newly elected city council member from Staten Island, gave an impassioned plea against the outrageousness of this act of collectivism. Landlords will have no money to improve and keep up properties, and this is a violation of our private property rights. So it's not surprising at all now that Mamdani wants to abolish ICE. He painted the familiar emotional picture of raids and arrests while ignoring a key fact repeatedly confirmed by the Department of Homeland Security, and that is simply this. 70% of them taken into custody by ICE have been charged with or convicted of crimes beyond illegal entry. So the idea that we are just kidnapping people who are in the country who have no criminal records and who have been here for years and are paying taxes is not accurate. It is false. The president and Tom Homan have made it clear that the priority is to deport those who have violent, illegal, or other illegal issues either in their home countries or in this country. People who are, by definition, dangerous criminals, many of them gangbangers, and that is the fact. The claim that directly contradicts the federal data and reality on the ground, where ISIS prioritized criminal illegal aliens, gang members, and repeat offenders, many of whom were released back onto the streets by the sanctuary policies that Mamdani still proudly supports. The mayor, of course, there's no surprise, doubled down on the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent murder, but she was the one who was attempting to kill an officer by ramming him with the vehicle. The New York Times can write otherwise as many times as they want, but I've seen the video. I've watched it over and over again from various angles. It's very clear that truck was a weapon. The fact that her husband was egging her on while filming the whole thing shows that this was a staged attempt to kill an ICE agent. And therefore, the shooting and the death of Renee Good, who's now their new George Floyd, was completely and totally justified. We are in for very rough times in this country, which is why I really pray every night that the president will consider the Insurrection Act of 1807. Otherwise, eventually, these cities in the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest will burn to the ground at the hands of these radicals who cannot win an election and do like the fact that Donald Trump has closed the borders and he's deporting their criminal, legal co-conspirators and fellow criminals. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for listening to us today in the Stone Zone. And until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.